Hello, everyone. Okay, let me see. There we go. You guys are probably wondering why I have these images, and you thought that you're here for a tech talk. Well, surprise. Well, let me explain. So who here loves to cook? Or at least loves to eat? Wow, all of us. Me too. Well, the anchovies in a Caesar dressing, you actually don't notice them until they're actually missing. And the lemon zest. You know, you put like a little bit of sprinkle in a dish, and it truly brightens everything up. And spices like cumin. You know, raw, it actually tastes really harsh, but if you're toasting it just for the right amount of time, it gives you just this layer of complex and wonderful flavor. And what do these all have in common? Well, they're tiny, they're small, they're subtle, often overlooked. But if you're combining them and using them at the right time, in the right sequence, in combination with other ingredients, it just creates magic and it creates transformation in a dish. That's how transformation can work. Not through one massive change all the time, and sure, sometimes these changes and events are really important, but sometimes these subtle and small signals of change are what really brings change and it makes a difference. So my name is Stephanie Kim, and I lead our signals and strategy efforts at KPMG's Enterprise Innovation. Our job is actually to look for these signals, big or small. We look for the patterns, we look for the edge cases, and we look for, these interactions that we don't expect to understand what's actually coming. We scan these signals and ask questions like, why are these things happening? What is combining to make different things and outcomes? And what technology and policy and markets, what if they all hit all at the same time? These are the questions that we ask. And that's the idea behind this report. In our second year, this is our second year producing it, we look at the 7 frontiers of change. And these aren't just technologies, but they're convergence points. This is where we start to see multiple forces forming. You've got AI and governance, climate and capital, energy and infrastructure, some of the things that we've been hearing about all day today and will continue to hear about in the next 2 days. And the risk isn't so that we fail to predict what's coming, but we're missing the interactions that actually make it matter. And that's why my team actually scans thousands of sources. And we look at data from academic papers, we track startups' funding flows and activities. We look at patent filings. We look at all sorts of things to make sense of it all. And really what we do is we translate and we try to map it to what we think is relevant so that we can influence business decisions in the future, whether you're acting now or later. And we use a step framework as social, technological, economic, and political. So when we're looking at the social forces, we're looking at the human behavior, the cultural changes and workforce transformation. When we're talking about the technology forces, we're looking at these really big breakthroughs in deep technologies. When we're looking at the economic forces, we see where the money is going, and we look at where the new markets are being formed. And when we look at the political forces, we look at the geopolitical tensions we heard about earlier today too. And we look at the power dynamics that make it or break it in innovation. So this framework will really help us understand how the signals fit in the business context in real life. So let us begin and talk about the 7 frontiers. I don't have time to talk to you about the 60-page paper we wrote, so I'm gonna just focus on a couple different things for each. And for the next 2 days, we're gonna be hearing from these amazing luminaries and thought leaders that are living and breathing each one of these areas. And I do expect we're gonna have a QR code, and I've seen them all around, that you will be downloading this report right after this talk today. So for now, let's talk about one of the most debated frontiers, the path to artificial superintelligence, or what some might say is the end game of AI. So it might sound far off, and potentially it is, but the reality is that we're actually shifting towards what we call general intelligence. And sure, we all have our favorite AI tools that we use, the ones that write emails and the ones that answer questions. But the reality is that these AI systems are now entering a phase where they're asking us questions, starting to reason, starting to make decisions on their own without our involvement and exceeding all of our expectations. So we've now moved from narrow AI to what we call agentic AI. These agents are actually able to coordinate and plan and act and complete tasks with very minimal input from us. And these models are forming long-term memories, really continuously learning from each other. Inference is moving to the edge, which means AI is able to run on personal devices, cars, robots, enabling instant decisions. And finally, these foundational models are actually showing behaviors that we've never trained them for. So they're sort of acting on their own. So this is kind of what we see as the trajectory of artificial general intelligence, or even further, superintelligence, where AI is surpassing all of our expectations and able to be better than everything that we do, from science to creativity to decisions and even ethics. So, but here's the catch. So the progress isn't necessarily linear, and the timeline is uncertain. But the truth is, the capability is also outpacing control. And AI, as they get more powerful and smarter, then the risks will begin to multiply, and we need to be aware of that. This misaligned AI can really escape our accountability and make decisions that could be, dangerous to humanity. So just something to think about, and who knows when superintelligence will come. It might take 5 years, as some say, or 25 years. We don't get to choose the timeline. But what we do get to choose is to prepare for what's to come. Build your oversight now. Train your people now. And stress test your governance models now. Because the better prepared you are, that will be that'll get you in a better position to thrive when and if it happens. So to understand where superintelligence is going, we have to really understand how it's even possible in the first place, and that's compute. Let's turn to the frontier that is powering literally everything AI touches. And we've talked about, compute infrastructure today too. As AI systems become more capable, their demand is surpassing what current infrastructure can handle. The compute needed to train foundational models is doubling every 6 months. And to run those AI models at scale is putting so much pressure on our energy availability, chip supply, architectural design. The big companies, especially the tech companies, are investing in their own AI chips, in their own GPU clusters to really optimize their performance. Sure, they're trying to optimize and reduce costs, but they're also trying to reduce the dependencies on vendors. So this whole shift is forcing organizations to rethink about the way they consider their architecture. They can no longer run all of their workloads in a single environment. What they have to do is they have to look at all the environments like cloud, on-prem, data center co-location, edge, all of these things. And the beauty is going to be about how you orchestrate to run all of your workflows in the best way possible. So, as AI accelerates, the organizations are going to have to think about their energy strategy, their compute strategy, and the way that they orchestrate these workflows to make that all possible. So, one of the things that we're starting to see are these new paradigms of computing. Maybe not new, because some of them have been around for quite some time, like quantum computing, neuromorphic computing. So we're going to talk a little bit about quantum. So I mentioned that quantum has been around, and I'm trying to look for my quantum faces here, but they've been around for quite some time. But now we're going to a point where they're going from labs to early stage deployments. And we don't actually know the timeline because, again, we don't know. But what we are seeing is the trajectory towards what we think is possible. So we're starting to see real breakthroughs in quantum chips, error correction, and hybrid architectures. And the global investment has really skyrocketed. Well, it's in the units that quantums use. Quantum computer uses these units called qubits, which allow them to be in different states and multiple states at the same time. And another way to say it is quantum can now solve problems that were not possible with classical computers just because of the way that it's designed. So we're talking about drug discovery, we're talking about molecular design, optimization, simulation. All of these are getting experimented today. And some of the shifts that we're really starting to see, and I'll point out a couple, quantum risk, that's truly rising. Because of the way that encryption can be broken with quantum computers down the road, sectors like healthcare, financial services, and government are starting to move towards post-quantum world where they can be protected if and when. We're also starting to see a movement towards hybrid architectures. It's very expensive and potentially not scalable to always have quantum at your fingertips. So what a lot of companies are doing is leveraging this hybrid model and using their classical computers with quantum to run some of their problems. And of course, no surprise, there's quantum and AI. In fact, AI is sort of all across the board. But what I have also found interesting is that this quantum and AI is the perfect marriage because they amplify each other. Quantum can speed up AI training, and AI in return can actually solve a lot of the issues the quantum industry has had, which is around noise and error. And I do believe that a lot of the breakthroughs that we've seen is potentially because of the growth of AI. Everybody has to invest in quantum, but what is important is that you have to be aware of these risks and prepare yourself now and start identifying use cases now so that you can experiment and start to build some awareness internally with your workforce now. So while quantum is still taking shape, we're actually seeing this other area that's already well underway, advanced manufacturing. We've spent decades offshoring a lot of our manufacturing, and that's for many good reasons, cost reduction, efficiency, but man, it's coming back. And I'm not gonna say all, but some of the sectors are coming back. And there are billions of dollars fueling sectors like semiconductor, clean energy, smart factory and manufacturing. It's a total reconfiguration of where and how things get made. And federal incentives like CHIPS Act or Inflation Reduction Act is also helping to fuel that movement to companies here. And it's not just about all the policy, it's also about technology. We're starting to see technology used on the manufacturing floor and in the operations in a way that we haven't seen before. We saw some photos and videos of humanoid robots. A lot of that is going in. Additive manufacturing, AI, of course, digital twin. All of these are really fueling innovation in the manufacturing sector. And I have to talk about the workforce because I've heard a lot of conversations about how AI is going to disrupt, people and learning. And I think this is something to consider. Workforce is moving towards digitally focused and AI augmented model. And I often, and I'm sure you do, used to think that advanced manufacturing was really about parents and grandparents' generation, kind of working the factory floor. No longer. What we're seeing is a shift towards this digitally enabled workforce model that everybody is going to have to watch. And we're going to have to start training our young people in order to get into this sector. And of course, sustainability is inseparable from this. You've got circular design, you've got energy efficient operation, all fueling, not only to meet regulations, but to meet consumer expectations. Our consumer expectations have changed. So it's very much about this new emerging manufacturing model, one that is capital intensive, one that is extremely tech focused, and tightly linked to the national strategy. While industries are actually shifting the way they reconfigure their physical assets, we now have the finance industry looking to reconfigure for digital assets. Digital assets are actually moving into the mainstream, and it's reshaping how value moves across borders and platforms. 2025 has been an incredible year for the digital assets community. Bitcoin became one of the top global assets by market cap. And the US government formally announced a strategic Bitcoin reserve, essentially recognizing Bitcoin as a national asset. And stablecoin is having its moment too. Just recently, the US lawmakers passed the Genius Act, which is the very first federal law that provides a set of regulations for how stablecoins can be issued, held, and audited. It's an amazing. And really the trend with all of this is that the regulatory clarity and the frameworks that is provided by the government is actually really giving confidence to institutions like the banks to enter. So, these are interesting things to watch. And of course, I'm going to talk about AI once again. AI and blockchain working together. Agents are actually going on blockchain, and agents are able to automate a lot of the transactions, the finance transactions, autonomously. And what we're also seeing is a tokenization of real-world assets. So things like real estate or money market funds are all being tokenized to enable fractionalized ownership. These are all the different trends that we're starting to see. So as you guys can see, digital assets is becoming a core part of the finance system. And even if you're not in the finance system today, what I think is also interesting to note is that there are industries that are completely shifting to create new value and exchange value. And I think that's going to be an interesting thing to watch. Environmental resilience. It is not a catastrophe, as it turns out, but I am going to talk about them in the context of resilience. This is all about, this actually underpins all the frontiers, because without the resilience for environmental changes, then long-term growth is not possible, whether we are in a crisis or not. So climate events, maybe we haven't learned from the past, but they are still pretty frequent. And anytime it happens, it seems to be more severe and severe. And what that really translates to in the business setting is that it's creating disruption to operations, and it's actually costing companies a lot of money. So what used to be just a regulatory and compliance play is it's now becoming a core foundation to the business operations and financial strategy. And one of the things that I will point out here is that, in the past, reaction has been the primary mode for climate changes and environmental changes, but now it's moving into a preparation mode, which is a difference. So companies are really building resilience into their physical assets and, digital assets. So infrastructure resilience with materials that really upkeep through the changes, and supply chain resilience as part of that. So the short-term focus might be on visibility, where you're identifying the vulnerability points and trying to create a playbook on how to respond. But the longer changes for environmental resilience is going to be the one that I was talking about with preparation and how you incorporate that into your business strategy. Okay, so while we're trying to figure out how to withstand climate volatility here on Earth, there's a brand new economy forming right above us, and that's going to be the next frontier. Or I could say the final frontier, truly. Launch cost has actually drastically dropped, enabling more investments and innovations to happen. You've got reusable rockets, you've got compact satellites, and a surge of private investments really opening access to how corporations can respond. And it's an ecosystem of different players. You've got universities, startups, and even emerging nations. What used to be a government-only domain is now becoming an open playground for innovation. And space is really starting to drive some real-world use cases. Like the way that we can use satellite data to track environmental changes and track agricultural changes, there are real use cases for how this type of data is going into the defense world as well. You've got in-orbit manufacturing. There are some materials that can be manufactured in space where the quality far exceeds what's possible here on Earth due to some environmental differences. And there's this whole movement of orbital data centers, the promises of continuity and low latency that you may not be able to achieve here on Earth. So, all of these things are coming up as not only, experiments, but real life use cases. And governance is actually a little behind. The market is truly growing faster than the way that regulations can handle. And the leaders who are acting now aren't necessarily waiting for all of this to happen either. They're actually building it together. They're building it with startups. They're building it with technologies, and they're creating this ecosystem of innovation. So let's come back to where we started. So we've got anchovies, the lemon zest, the toasted cumin. So these are just silly examples, but what they are talking about is about noticing the small things that often others can miss, and understanding how these small shifts can turn into a different outcome. That's what our frontiers represent. This is a place where signals come together and combine and converge with others to really transform a different business area. And if there is one thing that you want to take away here today is this: you don't have to actually see the whole future to act, but you do have to look early, and you do have to look often. And you do have to build the habits, the cultures, and the capabilities so that you can turn ambiguity into an advantage. Because in a world that's shaped by frontiers, your next one might be right around the corner. And if you are paying attention, you'll be ready. And with that, this is the QR code that I have seen some of you take pictures of. Thank you. And we're so excited to talk to you. The next 2 days, we're going to be talking about each one of these areas with amazing speakers. So thank you so much.